why don't we just tone down all the Christian stuff and we'll just give them a secular education? And then churches on Sunday, that you guys can do the religious instruction. And that was a huge mistake, to divorce English and history and science from the words in God's Bible.
My girls and I often watch the Living Waters videos. I don't know if you've seen those with Ray Comfort and Kurt Cameron and their team. And we watch them on a pretty regular basis, and they talk in there about the moral law, and almost across the board, I mean, I would say 95% or more of the people that they talk to, they say, you know, are you a good person? Yes, I'm a good person. Are you going to heaven when you die? Yes, of course I'm going to heaven when I'm dying. You know, most of them say yes, because I'm a good person. And then they ask the question, well, what makes you a good person? And they go through the moral law. They go through, you know, have you ever lied? Have you ever stolen? Have you ever looked at another person with lust? Have you done all these things? And everyone, of course, answers yes to all of those questions. And then they explain, but you've broken the moral law. But they've all been raised up to think, you know, I'm a good person. I'm doing okay in life. I haven't technically murdered anybody. And so I'm good to go. So why do they need God anyway? But because they've been raised up, most of them in this government school system, to believe that, well, maybe there's a God, maybe there's not a God, evolution, whatever, whatever. And they have no idea what they believe. And Christian kids today, especially, you know, if they're in a public school, they don't know what they believe. They don't know why they believe it. They can't defend their belief. And so we're throwing these kids into this institution that, like you said, I mean, from the beginning, they've had a master plan. And it's been so interesting to see the fall of morality. First, you take God out of school, you take the 10 Commandments off the walls, you take prayer out of school, and just little by little, they've plucked it all away. And now we have what we have today.
The destruction of Christian education in America was a gradual process, but Robert Owen was very clear that that's what he wanted. Horace Mann was very clear that that's what he wanted. You know, he rejected the crucial foundational doctrines of the Christian faith. He actually ridiculed people who believed that man was innately depraved. He believed that mankind is essentially good, and as long as they're not educated in these Christian doctrines, then they're not going to have to worry about those. He actually believed that public education would help us to eliminate 90% of the crimes, is what he said. He wanted the Bible out of the schools. And you know, for a Christian, the idea of education without the Bible is simply ludicrous. I mean, it's like an oxymoron.
Right.
God is so clear about what an education looks like, and it begins with the fear of the Lord. I mean, that's God says at the beginning of wisdom, at the beginning of knowledge. He tells us in Proverbs. So, when Horace Mann came along and said, we want to get the Bible out, he couldn't be too direct about it, but he said, well, we don't want sectarianism. We've got Calvinists, we've got Congregationalists, we've got Baptists. So why don't we just tone down all the Christian stuff and we'll just give them a secular education? And then churches on Sunday, that you guys can do the religious instruction. And that was a huge mistake, to divorce English and history and science from the words in God's Bible.
That's right.
It was a fundamental mistake that we went off the rails right there, and it's all been downhill from there. That was their plan, and now they're so sophisticated about it. The UN has something that they promote in their own handbooks. You guys probably experienced it if you went to public school. I experienced it in private school. It's an incredible psychological tactic. I know they've been doing it since the 60s or so. They call it values clarification. And what they do is they take these situations where it makes it seem like morality and ethics can be subjective. And I remember like it was yesterday, the one they did to me. I mean, they were sitting in class. They say, all right, guys, so you're shipwrecked and you're all jumping onto the lifeboats, but there's 10 of you on the lifeboats and there's only 9 spots in the life raft, and you're all going to sink and die if you don't choose who you're going to get rid of. And so they give you, characteristics of each one, and you're supposed to think of it in a very, utilitarian terms. Well, this guy's probably not going to be all that useful to us, so let's feed him to the sharks, rather than just thinking, well, what could we possibly do to make sure we don't have to kill anybody? And this has an incredibly profound effect on the children. It's one of many tools that they've developed over decades and really generations of psychological research into these questions for how do you break down a child's understanding of religion. And it begins in kindergarten. Billions of years there was stardust, and then somehow the stardust came alive and turned into a slime, and the slime became a monkey, and there you are, right? And so life is completely meaningless. So it just starts right from the second the government gets their hands on the children, and it goes on for 12 years, and they've got them for 5 days a week for 10 hours a day. And parents say, well, we'll just talk to them at dinner and then everything's going to be fine. Sorry, but it's not going to work. In most cases, it's not going to work that way.
No, it doesn't. And you, as the parent, you're putting your child into these schools under the care and authority of these teachers, and you're telling them, believe what your teacher tells you. And we've talked a lot about this on the podcast and on Homegrown Generation. If your teacher tells you that 2 times 2 is 4, well, of course you're going to believe that. Just like if they tell you that we were evolved, of course you're going to believe. Like, they can't differentiate between what's true and what's not true when you're putting them in that system for 40 hours a week. Of course they're going to believe what their teacher tells them, because as the parent, you've told your child to believe what their teacher is teaching them.
Right.
And how confusing for these kids to have no idea, well, what is true? What isn't true? Is God real? Is Santa real? Is the Easter Bunny real? I mean, they're all the same in their little world of imagination.
Which I think it's interesting because, I mean, like you said, it wasn't secret. These men were very clear on their intent. It's not like these were these secret things. When you look at what they wrote, I mean, John Dewey, I think he was very clear on what he believed and what his plan was.